Since 1985, Continuum has had the tremendous fortune to explore new ideas in music in Toronto, where the trees meet the water. Toronto is home to many indigenous people from across Turtle Island and has been a site of human activity for more than 15,000 years. We recognize that we are here because this land was colonized. Indigenous communities and allies struggle against the ongoing consequences of our colonial system. This land is the territory of the Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We are enormously grateful for the generosity of all Indigenous people who share this land with us and allow us to live and work here as uninvited guests.
Welcome to Continuum's 19th episode of Press Play, our web series that dives deep into extraordinary works of contemporary music in both their performance and in informative conversations with the artists who create the work. My name is Joyce, and I am the host of Press Play. I have the pleasure of being in the presence of Gregory Oh. Gregory Oh is a Toronto-based pianist, conductor, and curator. He teaches at the University of Toronto, the National Youth Orchestra Canada, and has recently joined the Faculty of Music at Memorial University of Newfoundland. Woo! Congratulations.
Yeah, great faculty at Memorial.
Gregory Oh has also been announced as the Harbourfront Centre's new curator for Summer Music in the Garden this coming 2022 season. Please make welcome Gregory Oh.
Hi, Joyce.
Thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
So if Thomas Wiggins was still with us, what is one thing you'd want to ask him?
Gosh. I mean, I would love to just get a sense of, like, I would love to listen to him play the piano more than anything else. I mean, the accounts of him are, who knows, they're all written accounts, but according to the accounts, he was an incredible piano player and he could listen to anything once and play it. Interestingly enough, I told that to one of my students and they steadfastly told me it was impossible and not obviously a fabrication, or it's like, an elaboration of a myth. But that's what interests me the most about him, that he was a very prolific composer. He had these very, I think, really unusual ideas about what music was and how he wanted to write it, but also just to have some, ability to actually hear him play. He was probably the most famous pianist of his day. He made more money, certainly, than any other pianist in the world. There's lots of speculation that he might have been autistic, or I don't know. And I think, in the small amount of reading I've done, it's also, I think if we talked about anything, it would be like the fact that nothing is simple. And I think that his state of mind, how he felt about his life, whether he felt, how did he feel towards his owner? I mean, just the fact that he had an owner. I mean, these are pretty complicated questions, and that would certainly be something I'd want to know.
So the piece also requires like so much, what's the word, decibelage for the piano. Like it requires so much effort for really energetic and really active motions of playing. So in the moments when you feel like your arms are about to fall off, how and when do you choose to be allowed to support both your artistic interpretation and what you believe is Thomas Wiggins' artistic vision?
Right. Well, I didn't get the talent of like instant memorization or photographic memory. I didn't get the talent of, super facile technique or, just an incredible cerebral mind. But one gift I did get was I can play loud. So I've never had an issue with that before. When I need to make a lot of sound for a long time, it's never been an issue for me, and it doesn't cause me any real physical stress or anything. And I feel also pretty good about my ability to play soft. I, uh, I've spent a lot of time talking to other pianists about technique, and that's one thing that my late teacher Marietta Orlov talked about with me, but also another I studied very briefly with another, unfortunately, late great pianist, Peter Longworth, and we talked about that a lot too. And so yeah, I can play really loud, and I can, when I'm on my game, I can play very soft. And I feel like in this piece, because so much of it is almost like a 3D representation of time, but also like distance, that you really need to play with where is the sound coming from, how is it getting closer, how loud does it get. And I think the answer to that last question is like incredibly loud. I remember I was at Stratford Summer Music when they played the National Youth Orchestra played the 1812 overture, and they had real canon, and I was profoundly affected by it. I found it, my body will carry that memory forever. It's not necessarily a good memory, but it did make me understand why people talk about, post-traumatic stress and disorders, or, just shock, being in shock, because even with those guns very, very far away, pointed away from me, when they went off, it was like I've never experienced a sensation like that before. And so when I played this piece, I had that in mind, that I wanted to create this not sort of fervorized version of war, but when the cannons go off, the cannons really go off.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay, I'm going to change course a little bit. I read that, so I was reading the webpage on Press Play about this episode, and it mentions that you mentioned if this piece had been written by Frederick Jevsky or Charles Ives, everyone would be playing it. Would you mind elaborating a little bit on this thought?
Yeah. What's funny about this piece is that I sort of think about it, I realize, in reverse time. So when the first time I listened to it was because I read that article by George Lewis in the New York Times, where he was talking about, the historic underrepresentation of BIPOC composers, and these are some African-American composers to listen to. So, which was a great start, and that's what, and he mentioned this piece in that article. And I remember listening to it and thinking, as I was listening to it, oh my gosh, that part reminds me of this, or this music reminds me of this. But what isn't in my head is this music was written by a 14-year-old blind slave in the 19th century, way before Shevsky, way before Charles Ives, way before Henry Cowell. But that was my reference, is that oh wow, those clusters remind me, for example, the constant clusters reminded me of Matthias Spalinger, who's a German composer. I think he's still alive, whose music I find incredibly interesting and disconcerting. This constant, unrelenting, like it gets to the point where it's no longer fun, or entertaining, and it just becomes like really difficult to listen to, I think, for me. And I that it's funny to think of that, Henry Cowell being, we think of Henry Cowell in the Groves Dictionary, whatever, as the first person to write clusters, but this whole piece is a cluster fest, this incorporation of popular themes and stuff, and the way that they're not necessarily treated in the same way. That's, we think of Charles Ives, we think of Frederick Shevsky. So because this journey of me coming to know this piece was kind of not in the order it should have been. The order should have been that Tom Wiggins is a 19th century composer. I don't understand why I didn't know this music before. Or maybe I understand, but I really should have known this piece. And then I should have listened to Shevsky and said, oh, that reminds me of Tom Wiggins, rather than the other way around. Um, oh, I did have one more thought.
Please.
So I'll just offer it, which is something someone asked me, because which is not a complicated question, but the fact that I'm Asian, um, and how do I place myself in this whole discussion about whether you consider yourself a person of color, and what about people who ask me about, you know, questions like what pieces should I play, or
Yeah, what
um,
should be in my repertoire? How should
yeah,
I represent myself? How should I present myself? How should I present other people of color? Where very interesting. I think it
yeah.
happens often too.
I think, you know, there's no right answer to that, but I did think about it. And one example I like to use is Michael Gray Eyes. I worked on a piece about um, the residential schools with him and National Youth Orchestra. And I remember him talking about that same issue, because, you know, his dancers were not universally indigenous dancers. And we were playing, part of the music was Claude Vivier. And I remember him saying, you know, this is not an indigenous problem. This is a Canadian problem. If you are, or a Canadian issue. If you are Canadian, then this is something that you need to be involved with. So this is why we're not just hiring indigenous dancers, or the orchestra is not just indigenous people, and the composers are not just indigenous. And I think I don't know if that's the answer, but I think that's really good advice when you're approaching this problem or issue as an artist or an interpreter or a musician, whatever you want to call yourself, which is that you should try to get involved, and you should try to involve yourself, and you should try to take a step, even if you don't think that you can do all 5K or 10K or the whole marathon. Take a step. And that's not a bad thing. And it's not a bad thing if you do something wrong necessarily. You know, intent is not always an excuse, but it's important. And it's important not to feel overwhelmed, like that it's good to have an interest, and it's good to like try to follow up on that interest. And it's hard to sometimes feel like you can navigate everything, but it's, yeah, take the first step, you know, learn something or read something or listen to something. I one, for example, I mentioned, I think it's John Davis, but also Monica Gaylord, who recorded an amazing album of music by Black composers. And that was, I think, probably 30 years ago, I'm guessing. And I just listened to it this year. And from listening to that, I found repertoire that I'm learning now. But I'm, yeah, just it's not a bad thing if that's all you want to do is learn a piece, then learn a piece. If you want to dedicate your life to it, dedicate your life to it. But take that step, and just know like anything positive is positive, and maybe we can always do more. And that's another discussion. But not to be overwhelmed by sort of what seems just like too big a problem to solve. Like, because like Michael said, we are all involved in this issue. This is not a BIPOC issue. This is an everybody issue.
Thank you for watching episode 19 of Press Play. Thank you to Gregory Oh for joining us for this episode. The next episode of Press Play broadcast Thursday, January 27th at 7 p.m. with Vines and Shadows by Anna Hostman, performed by Wesley Shen on harpsichord. Visit our website, www.continuummusic.ca, to learn more about all our upcoming Press Play episodes and other projects, to follow us on social media, and to sign up on our email list. And if you like what we are doing, click the support button and make a donation now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye.